Welcome to Let's Get Two, the baseball podcast from the fans' perspective. Now here's your host, James Christopher.
So before we jump into this Veterans Day episode of Let's Get To, I wanted to give you a really quick background on who I am in case you're a new listener and maybe you just started listening like after the 4th of July. I am a 7-year Army veteran. I was a 13 Fox, which is a forward observer. I served 7 years, did one major deployment over a year in Bosnia, and I achieved the rank of staff sergeant and then was put out of the Army when I blew my knees and an ankle in a couple of training exercise accidents and one very intense flag football game.
And welcome to Let's Get To. I'm your host, James Christopher, and today is Veterans Day. And you can see that I am wearing right now my Durham Bulls 4th of July cap, the American flag variant. And one of my favorite jerseys that I own, it is the Altoona Curve D-Day jersey. And it features a picture of the invasion, and the sleeves are printings from newspapers. It's a jersey that I coveted, that I got basically purely through the generosity of someone who wanted to make sure I had the jersey. So thank you to that secret someone. But, you know, it is Veterans Day, and as has become the tradition on this show on Veterans Day and Memorial Day and the 4th of July, I like to spend a little time talking about service and, in this particular case, the state of our country, which means I want to talk a little bit about the election. And I know we were all hoping for a break from politics, and I promise I think this is going to be that, so stick with me. Me voting for Joe Biden was not a secret. I had committed to voting for whoever would be against Trump in 2020 in 2016. And again, stay with me if you voted for Trump. This is not going to be what you think it's going to be. But I will give the reasons, and the reasons were two. One, the comment about John McCain saying he wasn't a hero because he got captured. I prefer guys who weren't captured, okay? Never sat right with me. And as a vet, when you're being sent into a situation when you could die or be captured or all those things, you don't want to do it for someone who looks down on that sacrifice. And I think it's demonstrated pretty clear that he doesn't get it. He doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand why people would be willing to die for the country. And for me, the one thing that our soldiers can ask for, and our Marines and our airmen and our members of Space Force, which I said with a straight face, but they should at least count on the fact that the president appreciates and at least rudimentarily understands the sacrifice. And that fact was driven home during the Democratic National Convention of 16 when he mocked the Gold Star family. Now, for those of you listening who don't know, a Gold Star family means that you lost a loved one in combat. They died. And what could have happened was, and it's, if you can find it on YouTube, the famous couple who got on stage during the DNC and said, "We're not voting for you because you don't understand sacrifice." Instead, the Trump organization chose to make it about race, saying, well, the woman didn't speak because you're not allowed to speak if you're Muslim, ignoring the stories that essentially she had planned to speak, was supposed to speak, and the minute her picture of her son came up, she could no longer speak, and that she can't even go into a room at her home with a picture of her son in it. The correct thing, the human thing to do, was to say, well, I don't agree with the politics. I definitely appreciate the service of that family, and our country grieves for them. See how hard it is? You just show a little bit of compassion, even with someone you disagree with, and all of a sudden, you don't look like quite the monster who doesn't actually understand that this country was built on, for many reasons, in many ways, but one of the most important ingredients that comes to building our democracy is the blood of the servicemen and women who died for her. So here we are. Biden has won, and it was close. Look, it was not, obviously Republicans and Democrats are going to spin this however they want. It was not a mandate against, let's say, Republican or conservative ideals. It was a mandate against the character of the president, which maybe might even be more important. The fact remains that it was still percentage-wise close. The Democrats lost seats in the House and probably will not win back the Senate. Who knows? But at the end of the day, in a very tight election, the American people spoke and I think said that they want a little bit of decency and a little bit of humanity back in the White House. And for me, what that means is, as someone having a president who sent their son to war, it's the closest thing we're going to get to what I think is the ideal candidate. I think the ideal candidate should be a veteran, and I think we will start to see some of the soldiers who kind of came of age in the Iraq-Afghanistan war begin to climb the political ladder and end up in the office. But that's where we are. We are where Biden has won, closer than Democrats will tell you, a bigger margin than Republicans will tell you, but he has won the White House and now has the responsibility of leading our nation for 4 years through an incredibly tough time. Now we're left with Americans as a choice as well. We can continue to tribal up, red and blue, and the red can be mad for 4 years and scheme how to win an election, and the blue can be really bad sports about it, and then we will continue to gradually weaken our union. Or we can figure out a way to finally come together. And I understand it is hard to even put yourself in the place to want to listen. It's so easy to think of everybody who voted for Trump as a horrible racist who are too stupid to know they've been lied to. It's easy to chalk it up to that, in part because Trump is a horrible racist and a sexist and a bigot and all the bad ists that are out there. And he has been lying. And it's even harder to want to walk across the bridge because as we sit here right now, he's still attempting what looks like a bureaucratic coup d'etat to steal the election. So I can understand why wanting to even approach the idea of some kind of dialogue, I'm not even saying compromise, but at least dialogue is hard. I know a lot of people who voted for Trump. They are good people. They are not even remotely racists. I acknowledge that there has become a very loud percentage of people who quite frankly weren't Republicans until Trump became a Republican and started to talk. And I definitely think that section of our culture needs to be dealt with. And I don't know the proper way to deal with that, but to assume that something like 70 million Americans are just out and out racists who are willing to vote for a would-be Hitler Stalin type is not only ignorant, but it's dangerous. And look, the fact is Trump has lied, but this is the situation that we're in. And until we realize that all the American people are in danger of being lied to and are in danger of being manipulated because we basically now consume the news like it's comfort food. We watch news that we already agree with. We only consume. There's only one person on the planet I know who watches all the news networks with any degree of regularity, and that is a co-owner of the podcast, Nathan Bybee. He really will watch and pay attention to what everybody's saying and make choices and decisions. And yeah, he is definitely a Democrat and probably a moderate Democrat if I were to put sort of shades of blue into his vocabulary, but he's very aware of what's being said. And the point is, I don't know that everybody goes through that level of discipline. I certainly don't. I turn on the news when I'm already at the end of a bad day where I've been dealing with this thing or that thing. And the last thing I want to do is see news about a stolen election because I know from several other news outlets that it wasn't stolen. There's no proof to it. But that's not ultimately my point. Everybody that's not getting all multiple viewpoints all believe just what they're being told. And it's something that's a very human thing. And it isn't just like, it's not just specific to Trump voters. And so we have to understand that they don't know they're being lied to necessarily. And again, education and conversation is the way to fix that. I think the real way to fix this country and to really get back to quote Ronald Reagan, the shining city on the hill, I'm not going to say make America great again, is to listen to each other. And we have to own the fact, those of us who, supported Biden, I am not a Democrat. I am definitely an independent and a moderate, but I assumed in 16 that when people from the middle of the country that voted for Trump saying they voted for Trump because our way of life is disappearing, I got real sarcastic and said, well, I'm sorry, gay people can be married. That ruins your life. No, they're losing their livelihood, like literally. And many of them voted for Trump in states that used to vote Democrat because they voted for Democrat all their lives and they've slowly lost their jobs and their careers. And they are worried about putting food on the table. And it is hard to get someone to worry about, global warming and the effects of the worldwide pandemic if you live in the middle of the country and you can't put food on your kid's table. It's like when you're in a plane and the plane depressurizes and you don't put your kid's mask on first. You put your mask on first because you can't deal with that correctly unless you're dealing with this part correctly. And so we have to listen to those reasons. We have to listen to those people. And I get it. Like, why should we? For 4 years, members of that group have said, fuck your feelings. Snowflakes, right? And they have been nothing but asses. And anytime you say anything, they are after you. It's been a rough couple of years for me on a personal level. But at some point, someone has to take the first step. Someone has to say, I'm going to really and truly put all of this behind us. And it feels like Biden's tone in his initial acceptance speech is the right one. Put all of this behind us. We have to figure out a way to do that so we can take steps forward. And we can finally figure out a way to hold this thing together. Because while I don't think we're at our most dire point in history, I think that was definitely 1968. But we're getting there. We're working our way through it. And if all we do for the next 4 years is give the middle finger to somebody who voted differently than us, we are actually all taking one joint step together toward our oblivion. Versus if we just take the opportunity to listen and have a conversation. Now, clearly, if he tells you, well, I'm losing my job because brown people can live here, well, that's a guy you can ignore. But if you say, hey, I was a little afraid to vote for Joe Biden because I understand that fracking is bad, but my whole family loses their livelihood if all of a sudden we turn it off and turn something else on. I'm sorry, but that's valid. You have to at least have that conversation and figure out a way to safely transition those new forms of energy while not completely destroying the economies of entire groups of people. But we don't care on the left because the left all live in big cities and they have all these things and they don't realize that many of those cities are powered and ran by the middle of the country they just don't care about. And that's facts. And look, there's a lot of reasons why I hated Trump. And I've already outlined the other ones and I'm not trying to pile on. And if you think about where I live, right? I live in a major city. I work in the film industry and I teach at an elite private school. I don't have very much in common with people working in the oil fields in West Texas or people that were working in Michigan or Pennsylvania or any of those blue wall states that they lost in 16 because, well, there are blue collar workers that are working and trying to, in their industries went away and they were sold down the river by previous administrations. I don't have anything in common with them. I have to do my best to be empathetic and realize that maybe my situation, my lifestyle, my education level, my social circles, maybe have put me out of touch with other peoples in the country. And that's something we all need to do. Everyone. It all comes down to, we really have a choice as a country. We can stick to our tribes, red and blue. We can hear an issue and then not decide what to think about that issue until we see if it was a Republican or Democrat or Senate. We can do that. That's definitely an option, I guess. It's a short-sighted one. We put up, I kind of started a cool thing on Facebook that put up your election record. And I thought it was pretty cool that I think I voted for 4 Republicans in my life and 3 Democrats. Like, I'm not going to pat myself on the back, but I guess I am, that I actually have demonstrated the ability to vote basically on the issues and the personality of the person running for office, and not just because they were Republican or Democrat. I at least have the luxury of actually liking many of the people I also voted against, so maybe I'm just the guy that likes everyone. But that can be our choice. We can stay in our red and blue tribes and slowly watch this democracy, this way of life, this country that whatever we think about it internally is still the country that people will make a raft out of a mattress to and float here, risking death because it's a better alternative than most other places on the planet. Or we can listen to someone much wiser than me. Abraham Lincoln, who said, a house divided against itself will not stand. And so I hope that we figure out a way to unite. And to bring it back to this show, we've got a great show ahead of you. We've got vets coming on to talk. We're going to talk a little bit of Astros. We have some updates on minor league baseball and the Raiders of the Lost Diamond. But honestly, what better way to put some of this aside by talking about one thing that most of the country does love, and that's baseball.
This just in. News from minor league baseball.
And we do have some breaking news. The New York Yankees have announced via Twitter that the Hudson Valley Renegades and the Somerset Patriots will be joining their affiliated organization. Congrats to them. We're very happy for them. I know for Somerset to move from the Atlantic League to the affiliated minor leagues is a big deal for those communities. And, this is a hard subject because we cheer for everybody in minor league baseball that have kept baseball alive. And there's going to be some winners and losers in this situation because that's the situation. There are teams that are going to go away or change because baseball's deemed it so. The problem with this announcement via Twitter is that exact same tweet is how the Trenton Thunder and the Staten Island Yankees found out that they were gone, that they were cut. We have to do better. Because it isn't just the Thunder and the Yankees from Staten Island that found out. It was all of their fans, their front office employees, their stadium employees, sponsors, city communities, people who cut the grass, it's communities we're talking about here. It isn't just, they're not just like pieces you move around on a map. It's not a game of baseball risk, although I guess it's been risky for these teams. It seems to me that both of these teams, the Yankees and the Thunder, have been there for the Yankees. Decades of support. They don't deserve a phone call right before the tweet goes live. They don't deserve some sort of official notice. Instead, they don't get spoken to about it for months. And I've heard this from other sources. Like I've heard from sources that we have on the show that they've not heard from their parent club when it comes to contraction. They're just going to find out on social media. No one's going to blame someone for making the best decision for their business. I am a capitalist at my core, and I love everything we do. But if ESPN said, hey, we want to replace you on baseball tonight, if I can be on intentional talk, I would do what was best for me. But you know what I would do? I would call Jess and Andy Tom Chesson, Scott McIntyre, and the hitter, and I'd call them all before it was announced and say, listen up, I'm going to take this opportunity, and I'm going to do my best to help you land somewhere else. All we need is a little bit of courtesy. It's one thing to know you have the power. It's another thing to wield it like you're a 3-year-old child. So for as much as I've always respected the Yankees as an organization, and, you can't, honestly, they're the cream of the crop. Shame on the New York Yankees. That's awful.
The Minor League Mind with Jess Knaster.
So we are back on Minor League Mind with Jess Knaster. Jess, we already talked about not just that the Staten Island Yankees and the Trenton Thunder, which have a combined 40 plus years as being part of the Yankee organization. And I don't know if you saw the article in Ballpark Digest that the Trenton Thunder found out when you and I did. There was no courtesy phone call. We have a lot to unpack. I think we've had 3 plans for this episode. We can at least put a pin in that one. But is that how it's going to be? Are we not even having the courtesy of a phone call in these situations?
That completely reflects what I have heard from people that I know who work in minor league baseball, either teams who are on the list or teams who are not on the list. Obviously working for the Jethawks, that gives me the insight there. But that level of communication is about what it has been regarding this topic since it became public information last year.
So 16 months or so at this point, I think.
Yeah, I think there was a little bit of a heads up. It sounds like there was a little bit of a heads up, at least for the teams that were on the list, when this proposal was initially suggested, which I believe was sometime August or September, so a couple months lead time from when it was leaked public information. But beyond that, there really hasn't been, from what it sounds like from who I've talked to, there isn't much in the way of advanced communication. And the public and the people involved find out simultaneously Twitter.
The thing that I found, I think, disheartening is it almost felt like with Staten Island, like it was the cursed vote of confidence from the owner of a football team that they had been assured for 16 months as they worked through these problems. You and I both know that the Staten Island club, particularly when they play the Pizza Rats, is one of the most popular minor league clubs out there. And then one of the things I found interesting in the letter that the Trenton Thunder owner wrote is he basically called it class warfare, that they were taking it from an urban center and putting it in a rich white suburb.
Yeah, I think that's definitely an interesting angle that I don't live in that part of the country, so I can't confirm or deny that, but it doesn't sound terribly off base based on what minor league baseball or Major League Baseball has said they want to do with regards to remember their initial proposal for all this late last year talked about, there was something about playing in places where players are safe, and that kind of got brushed over with everything.
Yeah, I don't know that I remember them saying that.
That was brushed over, and I mean it was also included with the idea of where players could live. That's reasonable accommodations, and that's that as we move on to other things that have been news dumps, there have been proposals of what classifies as reasonable living accommodations for minor league staff and players moving forward. I think that was part of the travel. The set of travel proposals that Major League Baseball had for minor league teams. But I think there has long been kind of this idea of, again, and this might have to be something that I say every week, asset management. Major league teams look at these future stars of theirs as cash cows, and they want to have as much control over them as possible. And they don't like that minor league teams can determine things like, the fact that minor league teams don't determine where they live. These minor leaguers get paid beans by their major league teams, and then are said, okay, go find a place to live, because minor league teams can't afford that sort of thing because they're doing what they're doing, and major league teams, their solution to providing more money to minor leaguers is getting rid of half of them. So there is kind of I think there is. I
just want people to understand that if Amazon had said we're raising the rates, subline, we're also laying off 30% of our workforce, we would flip out as a country.
Well, the thing is, as Americans, our society, we would love this dynamic of workers losing their jobs if we turned it into a reality TV show. Have the minor leaguers play baseball games, and you lose, you're gone. You're no longer a minor league baseball player. You've lost your team. But because it's being done in a form of corporate takeover, and I mean it really shouldn't excuse it because that's gross, because that's the Hunger Games the way I described it before.
Right.
But a corporate takeover should be considered gross, and I do like. Granted, Twitter comments. The Twitter comment section is not a place to necessarily garner actual feelings on things. But I do like that seemingly overwhelmingly people are pointing out that sort of class warfare thing. Yeah. But then also just in general, that it's gross to not be in contact. I mean, it's gross to cut teams anyway, but it's even grosser to not tell them first.
All right, so we have a lot to unpack then at a macro level. Do you think that Major League Baseball and the Major League Baseball teams know? And are they just letting this roll out? Or do you think we're finding out as soon as like I obviously we found out when Trenton found out, but we didn't find out when the Yankees and Somerset found out. Do you think it's all actually worked out and we're just going to have a slow news release? And if so, why not just rip the Band-Aid off and publish a list of 120 teams?
I think as more stuff gets released regarding affiliate changes and whatnot, excuse me, I think you're going to find more and more outrage, and just people upset at what's happening, regardless if the teams are finding out ahead of time. So I think there is merits to going either direction, for it to just be a slow bleed, death by 1,000 cuts style of just, here's one, now the next day here's the other, then that one and that one and that one. And I wouldn't be surprised to see it have to be done that way, because I think Major League Baseball would like to keep their hands as clean as possible, especially because with everything that was put on the ballot, not just presidential, but everything that was put on the American ballot last week across the country, there seems to be some swaying towards a more progressive outlook on things, with states legalizing marijuana and longer paid parental leave and mandatory minimum wage. Major League Baseball could potentially find their antitrust back in play again, as was initially suggested by the MiLB Save MiLB task force, the congressional task force from last year. That could potentially be a thing that's in play again once the dust settles on all of the other things that Congress needs to take care of.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think the biggest thing that MLB benefited from was COVID hitting. It's hard for us to care what the Save MILB task force is doing if we are all struggling in a pandemic. Do you feel like, are people smart enough to realize that the blame is going to lie with Major League Baseball, or is their strategy, which you've seen sort of alluded to, by letting it really come almost from the minor league teams? It seems like these announcements are coming. It seems like it's not even like, I didn't see anything the Yankees have put out officially, but I definitely saw a yay from Somerset and a yay from, I can't remember who else it was, but it does seem like they're letting the minor league teams do the heavy lifting on the announcements in the first place.
Well, I think that certainly seems like how it's going, and maybe it's the same strategy as I suggested for Major League Baseball, for the individual major league teams to not promote any news themselves, because hopefully in their eyes, there aren't going to be as many followers, and I apologize because I love minor league baseball all around. There aren't going to be as many Twitter followers of the Hudson Valley Renegades as there are the New York Yankees. So if the Hudson Valley Renegades are saying, we've been chosen, we've been selected by the Claw, and now we're going to play as a high A affiliate for the New York Yankees, then fewer people could potentially be outraged that their high A affiliate is not going to be the Tampa Tarpons anymore, even though they're still going to be in low A, and that whole bingo tumbler of stuff.
Yeah.
But what gives me hope for a team like the Staten Island Yankees is this reorganization that the Florida State League, and I apologize, I'm going to get kind of Steve Kornacki.
I'm about to say, yeah, we're moving we're moving the map around. So
I'll have a tie on next week. I'll have Yankees will be ready to go.
Good.
But the Florida State League is going low A. The the high A affiliate of the New York Mets previously were the St. Lucie Mets, who were in the Florida State League. They are now going to be low A. The other low A, or the previous low A affiliate of the Mets, is in Columbia, South Carolina, the Fireflies. So they now have, if going by affiliates from previous years, they now have two affiliates who are in low A. They're without a high A affiliate. They're supposedly going to be this new Mid-Atlantic League next year, of which the Hudson Valley Renegades, the Yankees' new high A team, is going to be in. The Brooklyn Cyclones, who are a Mets short season affiliate, supposedly they're going to go to double A, because Binghamton is going to get left out to dry. That's not official yet. But then that leaves Staten Island potentially looking for a place to play and the New York Mets without a high A affiliate. So there is hope for a team like for the Staten Island. Oh, let's not call them the Staten Island Yankees anymore. The Staten Island
Pizza Rat
Baseball Club.
I think they just got to run with being the Pizza Rats. They got to just own it. So there's hope, and of course, the team that gets left out in all this, and I think they saw the writing on the wall back when we had them on the show at the end of season 1, is the Binghamton Rumble Ponies. And that, to me, and maybe it's because it's an owner I spoke to at length before the interview, that's the gut punch, because I know that he himself and then the community put millions into that ballpark with the Mets request.
Yeah, and potentially the one thing that might save them and instead have the Brooklyn Cyclones go play in the same league as the Hudson Valley Renegades again, because they were New York Penn League foes, and maybe keep and save the Rumble Ponies is the Wilpons are no longer in charge of the Mets. There's a new owner of the New York Mets, and so that could change things. Back to your previous question of if these major league teams already know what's happening. I've heard from a couple people that they have been in contact with their major league clubs, and unless they're being lied to, some of the major league teams don't know, or at least some of the contacts don't know what's happening and don't know the future of their minor league affiliations. So I think there is probably, I'd say, 95% it's probably determined, especially a team like the Yankees, who they're a flagship organization. They people listen to what the New York Yankees want to do. They play in a big market. They have a lot of money involved, both with fans and what they spend. They play in a $1.3 billion ballpark. So the New York Yankees maybe know better than the Cincinnati Reds or a Midwest team or just a smaller market team.
And a couple of questions then to spin out of that. The talk had been, and we talked about it on the show, that the New York Penn League could itself become a collegiate summer league, but they have just lost. By my count, it depends on what's in these mail-in votes here, but we have just. But the Yankees snatched one of them up with the Hudson Valley, and your hypothesis is that was it Brooklyn could also be snatched up.
Brooklyn was New York Penn League before, so they'd be staying.
If they become Double A, though, for the Mets, they wouldn't be New York Penn League anymore.
No, correct. Oh, yeah. So the New York Penn League would be going, yeah.
Yeah. So what does that leave for the other teams like the Tri-City Valley Cats, for example, the Astros short season affiliate? Are they are they also out?
I mean, I have to imagine with Somerset, who was not really talked about, at least not as much as St. Paul and Sugarland were. But with one team from independent baseball, one organization, because the players won't be coming, one organization coming over from indie ball into affiliated baseball, I think that makes clear potentially what that whole partnership thing that Major League Baseball announced with several different indie leagues, that was 3 years ago, right? That's what it feels like, at least. I think it was September, October. I have no idea. But whenever it was, that was announced, I think it becomes clearer what that partnership might actually mean with a team like the Somerset Patriots coming in, but then potentially the Binghamton Rumble Ponies and, for all intents and purposes right now, the Staten Island Yankees, or Tri-City also being offered opportunities to go play in the Atlantic League. Because there is a team on Long Island. The Long Island Ducks are a very successful, long-standing franchise that I'm sure would love to have either other New York boroughs or other New York area teams to play against.
And if you theoretically lose Sugarland, you now have a true Atlantic League instead of having Atlantic and then a Gulf Coast team. Do you think that this changes the math? I love that we're using this analogy. I really feel like what was his name? Brian Williams, and I'm just throwing to you during the election. Does this change the math for you on St. Paul and Sugar Land? Because it was, like you said, Somerset wasn't discussed. I cannot imagine that the Atlantic League is going to allow itself to get gutted, but maybe they don't have a choice anymore. So do you feel like we're going to see 3 Indy teams become affiliates, or do you think maybe one of those other 2 now is not?
I think it's at least 3. I think there was no talk of the Patriots, I think simply because I don't believe they have any sort of Major League Baseball ownership ties.
Got it.
And that is part of the reason why Sugar Land and St. Paul both are talked about, is because the Saints have, I believe there's some minority ownership of the Twins within the majority owners of the Saints. And then the same thing for the Skeeters, who their majority owner is a minority owner in the Astros. So that sort of tie-in, I think, has strengthened those as possibilities. They also play to pretty big crowds. I believe those are especially St. Paul, but I think Sugar Land too. They play to one of the biggest nightly crowds in all of independent baseball. So as we talk about things like going to nicer neighborhoods where you're going to play your baseball, or whatever the equation is to allow whatever the variables are in that math problem that allow for the X to be more money. I think teams like Sugar Land and St. Paul allow for that equation to come out into the black for their major league owners and for MLB as a whole.
People always say leave politics out of baseball, but right now, first of all, it's always in baseball, but right now it's class warfare. Last question, it has nothing to do with contraction, or at least it is tangentially. One of the big rumors now is that the minor league baseball season might not start until May and then go after Labor Day. There's been a lot of pluses and minuses for that. I mean, on the one hand, watching a game in Buffalo in April looks awful. So, but also I don't want to go to Round Rock after Labor Day in Texas. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it changes the sport much?
Just to first say, having worked in Iowa in April, it's rough. It is rough. And, from a bottom line standpoint, not having to pay staff, not having to pay, and I mean game night staff for minor league teams, and put on a full production when you're going to have maybe a fourth at best of your normal summer crowd. That's a big advantage. And certainly that's something that has been talked about. I don't know about going long-term beyond 2021 of starting a season later than May, but I know they've talked about having a shorter schedule, and the shorter schedule, I think, for minor league teams, especially in the northern states, that benefit from nicer weather in the summer only and not in April. That's if the schedule gets shortened, which has been talked about, down to like 120 games, and April is still on the table long term, then what's the point? You've lost games throughout the summer. You've lost 10 home dates potentially throughout the summer when you would be at higher or full capacity. Right. And so I think starting a season in May as it pertains to next year, the fact that we're in November now with no schedule in sight, starting a season as late as May, giving that extra month buffer will be huge for minor league teams once they know a little bit more about when their season starts, when their games are, potentially a little bit more information on what sort of capacity they can have and how they can run their business from that standpoint. So I think that's not necessarily all bad. It would be if the schedule going from May to maybe the end of September is the new norm. That's when it would be a bigger issue.
And I guess what makes sense is the fact that they don't do September call-ups anymore at the major league level. You might want your minor leaguers playing a little longer to keep people sharp if you do have an injury going into the playoffs. That might be the only thing that makes any sense. He is Jess Knaster, host of the Minor League Mind. He is our Minor League Mind. We'll talk to you next week.
There will be no new news between now and then, I promise you.
This just in. News from minor league baseball.
So yet another breaking news segment with some more minor league baseball contraction. Now in the last segment, Jess said, I'm sure there won't be any breaking news in the next week. And of course he's being facetious. This is going to come fast and furious. I just didn't think that it would be 12 hours. And so in the interim, from when we recorded, the New York Mets have announced their new affiliated system. And I don't know what that means, if these teams got phone calls first or if it just came out. But it looks like their affiliated system will be Syracuse, St. Lucie, Brooklyn, which will be an addition, and Binghamton. So yes, the team we were worried about from the beginning. We had the owner on the show last year. The Binghamton Rumble Ponies will keep their club, which I think is great news for that community. I'm so excited for them. Kingsport and Columbia will temporarily lose their affiliation, though I think Columbia will definitely find a new affiliate. It's a great ballpark and a great community. One other note about this, though, is it looks like, according to some reports, that the Major League Baseball individual teams are also finding this information out, meaning they have very little say in what's happening. And in some of the new affiliations, the parent club haven't been happy. They don't mind that some of their clubs are so far away for relationships or whatever else you might want to factor in. And so it looks like Rob Manfred is taking his one baseball thing to its logical conclusion, which is to piss everyone off.
Raiders of the Lost Diamond. A look into baseball's past.
All right, so we are jumping in with Andrew Nelson on a special Veterans Day episode of Raiders of the Lost Diamond, and you did a lot of work coming up with the story this time, didn't you?
It was a little more digging than usual, but I was satisfied with the results.
Okay, so what do we got? Who are we learning about today?
So a lot of people who are familiar with baseball history and our history enthusiasts in general are familiar with, the big leaguers who served during World War II, either in combat or behind the lines. It's a pretty familiar story. So I wanted to kind of tread some less familiar ground. So today we're going to talk about the Midwest Giants of the 34th Infantry Division. So the 34th Infantry Division, also known as the Red Bull Division for their red bull skull on a black Southwest American-style jar patch.
I just had an amazing joke about shouldn't they have been the You've Got Wings division? Maybe not as funny as I thought it was. Okay, it's fine. It's okay. They're not all winners, Andrew. They're not all winners. Sorry, continue.
And it's not as famous, obviously, as the 101st Airborne or the 82nd Airborne or some of those units that a lot of people have heard of, but it's one of the more storied divisions of World War II. The 34th was activated in 1941. It had previously served during World War I as an amalgamation of Midwest National Guard units. And the World War II unit was made up of National Guard units from North Dakota, South Dakota, Iowa, and Minnesota. The Red Bulls were the first U.S. troops to arrive in Europe, disembarking in Belfast, Northern Ireland, on January 26, 1942. They got down to work training right away, but they also needed diversions from the hurry up and wait of Army life and reminders of home and normalcy. So the men of the 2nd Battalion and the 3rd Battalion of the 34th, of the 34th's 133rd Infantry Regiment. We're going to go with a lot of unit designations today. It's going to be
a lot of numbers, people. Bear with us.
Yeah, bear with us. A lot of alphabet soup probably too. Made up of guardsmen from Iowa, played the first U.S. military baseball game in Europe during the war on April 25th, 1942. The 3rd Battalion side prevailed 14-4, with Corporal Robert Lang on record as the winning pitcher. And before the war, Bob Lang had been a pitcher in the Cleveland Indians minor league system. In 1939, he recorded a 10-8 record for the Fargo Moorhead Twins of the Class D Northern League. Yeah, we saw a bunch of old pictures and a jersey of theirs when we were up in Fargo.
Yeah.
I think it was even from that era. He pitched 123 innings across 31 games and had a 4.46 ERA for the Fargo Moorhead Twins. In 1940, Bob was promoted to the Flint Gems of the Class C Michigan State League. And as a hurler for the Gems, Lang would earn an 8-4 record over 21 games in which he pitched 122 innings and had a 4.5 ERA.
So not great.
Not great, but decent.
Can we also talk about the biggest oxymoron of all of it? The Flint Gems.
The Flint Gems, yeah. The first home run hit by an American serviceman in Europe during the war also occurred in this first game. Corporal Leo J. Robinson of Harpers Ferry, Iowa, hit a solo shot during the 6th inning for the 3rd Battalion side. Mm-hmm. Robinson had turned down a contract to play for the Crookston Pirates of the Northern League back in 1936 because he could make more money for his family in the Civilian Conservation Corps than he could in minor league baseball. That was important during the Depression.
It was, and also it's sad how things have not changed.
Yeah.
That's
sad but true.
Sad but true.
In May 1942, the 1st Armored Division arrived in Northern Ireland.
Old Ironsides, baby.
Yeah. They are the second American division deployed to Europe, and they finally brought some extra divisional opponents to the Red Bulls. On July 4th, 1942, the Midwest Giants of the 34th Infantry and the Kentucky Wildcats of the 1st Armored played the first officially recognized military game of baseball in Northern Ireland since World War I. It was an unusual game, to be sure. The two teams faced off on a converted soccer pitch that lacked both a backstop and a pitcher's mound. Despite the unusual playing conditions, the soldiers still put on a good show. The Giants eked out a 3-2 win over the Wildcats, coming from behind to win in the 8th and hanging on with some solid relief pitching in the 9th inning. The two teams would meet again on July 25th and play a charity game benefiting Belfast Hospital for Sick Children and the Ulster Hospital for Children and Women. Despite a wobbly pitching performance by Vern Kohler, the Giants once again triumphed over the Wildcats 9-6. Private Vern Kohler had also pitched the middle innings of the July 4th game, and his teammate like his teammate Bob Lang, he had also been an Indians farmhand before the war. Vern took the mound for the Logan Indians of the Class D Mountain State League in 1938 and bounced between the Class A New Orleans Pelicans of the Southern Association and the Class C Springfield Indians of the Middle Atlantic League in 1939. In 1940, he joined Bob Lang on the Flint Gems, where Kohler would play his last year of pro ball in 1941 for the Class B Cedar Rapids Raiders of the 3I League. While none of these Midwest Giants would go on to find fame on the baseball diamond, their parent division would distinguish itself through long, hard service during the war. The 34th Infantry provided the core of the 1st Ranger Battalion, which would go on to fight at Dieppe, being the first American troops to fight in combat in the European theater. Mm-hmm. The rest of the Red Bulls would go on to fight in 6 major campaigns across North Africa, Sicily, and Italy. The 34th Infantry Division amassed a total of 517 frontline combat days, the second most of any U.S. division in World War II.
Wow. And not one of them in aviation. Red Bull. I'm sorry, man. We're gonna make that joke work.
The modern Red Bulls do have some aviation units. The Red Bull division lives on as the parent organization of the Minnesota Army National Guard.
Well, there you go. You see, we get there. Yeah, that was awesome for me to listen to because we had another veteran on the show earlier, and sports is so important when you're deployed. Yeah. It's a little bit of normalcy. So thank you so much for bringing that to the show.
My pleasure, Jim.
This just in. News from minor league baseball.
And one last bit of breaking news. Last episode, we did start giving away awards in a new competition that we're referring to the Moral Flexibility Olympics. And it's basically how quick baseball can bend itself out of everybody associating with the Astros should go sit in Nuremberg to these few are okay. And so Alex Cora was hired by the Boston Red Sox. Again. And in his press conference, he said, listen, I did not bring my cheating from one organization to another organization that had already cheated and was pretty okay with it in a city that, let's be frank, is really good at cheating. He promises he didn't do it and that he's ashamed. So we are very excited to give Alex Cora the very first award in the Moral Flexibility Olympics, the gold medal for lie bending.
On deck, the Let's Get To interview, brought to you by Marco Fine Arts.
All right, so we're excited to welcome to our Veterans Day episode of Let's Get To Brian Barefield, but you know him as Big Sarge Sports. How's it going, man?
Hey, what's going on, brother? How you doing?
I'm great. First things first, hey, our Cowboys showed some life. We can't be mad at it, right?
You know what? For the first time this season, I was proud of the way that they played because they could have laid down against that undefeated Steelers team.
Yeah.
But they didn't. They showed some heart. And, I mean, maybe it's because they let Worley go, but I was so happy they let him go. But this is the first time I've seen Mike Nolan. It seemed like Mike Nolan and Kellen Moore were finally on the same page on the offense and the defensive side of calling plays. Now, you know, our secondary they're still learning. The Cowboys secondary is still young. They're still learning. And so I knew that they were going to have some laps. And so I just was happy that they didn't get blown out. So I was really proud of them yesterday.
I was too. I'll be the first one to admit that I actually went to the movies for the first half because they were doing a special screening of Goldfinger to honor Sean Connery. And I was like, well, I got to go, but this game is on, but they're 14-point dogs. But no, you're a real inspiring guy. And for the listeners out there, and the viewers, like oftentimes when you serve in the military for any amount of time, you get out and it almost feels like you're at an age, like I was a 28-year-old college freshman. Mm-hmm. It feels like dream chasing is over, time to get a job and kind of begin the march. But you didn't do that. Like, so tell me a little bit about your service and how you ended up getting into sports.
So before I joined the military, I was a teacher. And I went through education. I started out here in Texas, and then I ended up in Georgia because, you know, at the time, my mom, God rest her soul, she was sick. So I moved to Georgia to help my stepfather take care of my mom. Well, in the process, I met this young lady who eventually became my wife. But during the dating process, it's funny because I was sitting on the edge of the bed watching NBC News. I'll never forget. And then they popped up and they were like, yeah, so they just changed the age of enlistment to go into the military. And so they moved it to 37 years old. So at the time, I think I was 36. And I was like,
wow,
maybe. And so I told her, I was like, hey, I think I might go into the Army. And she's just like, and I said, I think I might go into the military. She started laughing. So I said, okay. So I went to the recruiting office. I went to the Air Force first because I was like, I want to live a good life and I want them to use my mind. So, and they were like, nah, they moved the enlistment age for the Army. You need to go next door. So I walked in and they looked and I was like, hey, I want to join the Army. And it was like, okay. So I told my wife, you know, hey, I'm joining. I mean, she's my girlfriend at the time. And I said, I'm joining the military. She was like, yeah, okay. And then as things started going along, she's like, you're serious? And I was like, yeah. And so when I got put into the delayed entry program, she knew that it was real. And I knew that at that time, because we were 3 hours apart to begin with, but then I moved down closer to her and I knew that she was going to be my wife. And she had 4 kids from a previous marriage. So you can't just go work at Walmart with the way that insurance was. At that time.
Right.
And it was the next thing on my list, man. I live my life where I don't want to say a thrill seeker, but I don't have a ceiling. So I always look around and be like, so what's next? So education, and I was fed up with the educational process too, because funding kept getting cut. And It was making harder and harder for teachers to do their job, teachers and administrators. So I joined the military when I was 37 years old when I joined.
And what MOS did you pick?
So I started out as a 42 Alpha, human resource specialist attached to a infantry unit in Baumholder, Germany.
Okay.
Because I had a degree in business information systems.
Right.
And so I joined, and the funny thing was, the guy who enlisted me was on the enlisted side. He knew I had a degree. He knew he should have sent me across the way and say, you can enlist as an officer, but he's like, nope. So by the time I found out that I could be as an officer, he's like, man, we had to start your paperwork all over again, this, that, and other. And so I was like, nah, it's cool. And so, it worked out because like Big Sarge sounds way better than like Big Captain.
Big Captain. It's funny how they do that, because I did the same thing. I went to the Air Force and I was like, man, 4 years, that's a long commitment, but the Army would give me 2. I did 7. So that's how I work with math. And they said, oh, you went to a really good high school. We're going to make you a forward observer because you can do math, not just an infantry guy. It's funny how they apply those things. Baumholder, Germany. I lived there too. I was stationed, worked at Eder Oberstein though for.
Can I ask you a question?
3 years. Yeah.
How long did it take you to realize that Eder Oberstein was actually 2 cities, Eder and Oberstein?
I might have been today years old. I really didn't know that. I didn't. My wife probably knew that. I'll never forget that though, because what Baumholder. I mean, it was called the Rock, right? Like it's awful. And I married a woman who had graduated from UT who did not know this life. I was already in E6, and we were dating, and the orders to Germany came in, and I said, "Well, you can go if we get." Well, she actually proposed to me, actually, but anyway. So we are on the bus from Frankfurt, getting dropped off at all these really beautiful bases. And then we get to Baumholder and she burst into tears, man. It was awful.
Hey, look, so I remember when they sent because the Ramstein Air Force Base.
Yep.
They sent some people from Ramstein to come do some work at Baumholder for like 2 weeks. And so when I met the guys, I was like, okay, cool. Talking to them, they was like, yeah, we get an increase in our cost of living allowance because we're here, because we're at substandard living. And I was like, substandard? I live here every day. What are you talking about? They was like, it's kind of like the ghetto here.
I lived next to Air Force TAC Ps in Fort Polk, Louisiana. We shared a wall and they got the substandard housing allowance. And I was like, same thing. What do I get? And the Army's like, what do I care? You can stop a bullet. Any deployments?
Yeah. So 2010 to 2011, I was deployed to Kabul, Afghanistan. So I was in Kabul for, I want to say 6 or 7 months. And then they moved us to Darulaman. So we went from Camp Alamo to Camp Stone. And then once we finished that out, we came on back home. So I only got 1 deployment. I did 6 years in the military before I got medically retired back in 2015.
Yeah, I got medically retired too. They break you. When you're an FO, they break you.
Yeah.
One of the things like that I love having, and we do episodes like this for Memorial Day and for 4th of July, because I think we have forgotten as a country that we've got men and women right now over there getting shot at, doing the work, all that stuff. How important was sports for you when you would, particularly deploy, just to make you feel a little bit normal?
I was blessed to be able to have, for those of y'all who don't know, I am a diehard Dallas Cowboys fan, and I don't care if they go 0-16 and the Cowboys can never win a game again for the next 5 years, and I'm gonna still be a Dallas Cowboys fan. I have been since I was knee-high to a duck butt. I was originally born in Waco, Texas, before I moved to Houston, Texas in 1985. So when I got here, I was like, well, where the Cowboys game, man? And they was like, no, you're going to watch the Oilers. I was like, the Oilers? I was like, we watch them one time a year for the Governor's Cup during preseason. It's like, I don't want to watch any. I was like, where are the Cowboys games? And so, but I was blessed to be able to be in, when I was downrange, my roommate was a diehard Dallas Cowboys fan too. So that made life a lot easier. But in my section, in the S1 section, we were all, from my NCOIC all the way down, we were all huge sports fans. So in the midst of working, doing what we was doing, we went to the field, we got a chance to interact with other people. Like sports has always, to me, sports is a universal language.
Yeah.
It's something that most people can come together and debate and laugh about, and, because they got a lot of loyalty to their teams, without it getting violent. I've never been in a situation where debating sports has gotten violent. And so that's why I always say that I feel like sports is the universal language that can bring people together.
You know, it's funny you say that again, because I remember, remember when you're living like in Germany for like your unit becomes your family. And so we would have them over for Texas OU and we would like teach them. And so even though they were Ohio State fans or whatever, for that 3 hours, they were also Longhorn fans. And it was a beautiful thing. I want to talk a little bit about, you get out and, I first heard you on 790 in Houston to listen to that all the time, but what prompted you to say, I want to go? Because you provide a very different voice. And I think I hope that you, like, if 790 should just hire you permanently.
I hope so too.
I don't know who I would kick off because I actually know Indy Kalu like tangentially. Yeah. So, but like, how did you cultivate your voice in that direction?
So what happened was when my wife was living, because my wife, one thing I can say is thank the higher power. I don't want to get too religious. I don't know. People believe in who they want to believe in, but me, thank the higher power that I married a sports fan. And when I say a sports fan, like her team was Jacksonville Jaguars. And she didn't care how bad they was. That's who she rooted for. The Rockets was her team. So with me or without me, she was going to watch her team. And so we, when we got out, we moved here and I started dabbling just a little bit in sports. A lot of people don't know this, but I tell this story all the time. And I also tell it to a lot of young people who want to get in sports and think that they're just going to jump right in and be on the radio and be on television and be on ESPN and Fox and things like that. And I was like, do you know that I started out holding the camera like this? I'm holding the camera for the guy to do the wrap-ups. And, the first game we did was UT versus TCU when TCU blew UT out in Fort Worth. And we left there and we went to go and cover. That's the first time I watched Patrick Mahomes play live, Texas Tech versus Baylor.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And I was like, I'm not going to even lie to you. I was like, oh, he's all right. I couldn't see him being Patrick Mahomes that he is today. So, but I started out that way. And that group that I was with had a weekly radio show. Started out with 7 to 8 guys in a studio sharing 4 mics. So you're all double dutch to try to get your point across. And so I went from that to then the numbers started cutting down and I started co-hosting the show. Then I started hosting the show. And then that group dismantled. And then I had my own sports show. And then I walked away from the sports show. And so I'm the sports editor for Houston Style Magazine. And one of my really good friends is the editor. And so Natasha Gransberry, which is a college friend of mine, she was like, hey, you ever thought about writing? And I was like, she's like, because you're great at storytelling. I'm pretty sure you can write articles too. So we called up my friend and she was like, hey, you want to just do it because you can go to the games? I was like, no, I watch the games better from my television. So, and that's how it started. So it went from there to just, going forward and moving like that. And I think that for me, the thing for me is I go into it with an open mind. I feel like sports, unless you're talking hard facts, other than that, it's just opinions. And if you can agree to disagree and say, hey, I respect your opinion, I just disagree with it. And then you move on from there. That's how I am. And then I got a little bit of a sarcastic manner, sarcastic tone. I can poke the bear a little bit. And then I'm a storyteller because I was thinking last week, I was sitting down and doing nothing. Like I was literally sitting on the couch doing nothing. And I was like, I have been blessed to be in some real interesting places, meeting some interesting people. And I was like, dang, how did I become so blessed? So that's how I got into it, man. And I take it as once I'm, talking sports, I never take it personal. Nothing is ever personal to me. I love the Dallas Cowboys, but Jerry ain't cutting me no check. So, Jerry's not cutting me a check, and
I'm putting that on a T-shirt.
And so I'm a huge, not only am I blessed to be able to cover the Astros, but I'm an Astros fan too. But, Jim Crane ain't cutting me no check. You see what I'm saying? So
He didn't cut Luno a check. Oh, anyway. I do want to ask you about 17 and the Astros and stuff, because you talked a little bit about it when you were covering the ALCS, and you talked about your wife in that season too, and some of the stuff you've written. Why is it okay that I can still be proud of that I grew up in the Astrodome, man. Like, why is it okay that I can still be proud of that 17 season? Why can I ignore Dodger and Yankee fan and tell me I'm the worst person on earth?
Well, because baseball has a history of cheating. Baseball has a history of cheating scandals. And so if baseball was in its purest form, no cheating, no steroids, no Black Sox scandals, no electronic devices being used even before the Astros. If baseball was squeaky clean, then I could sit back and say, all right, man, y'all right. The Astros shouldn't. But when I look at a person like Alex Rodriguez being able to sit on television and criticize people for cheating when his whole career pretty much was based on cheating, when you look at, Barry Bonds not being able to be, inducted into the Baseball Hall of Fame, when during that era, everybody knew it and it was open, the juiced baseballs, which are real. I'll tell you about that off air. But so if in its purest form, baseball never had any scandals, any cheating scandals and things like that, then I'd be like, okay, I get it. But I mean, what is the old saying? If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. And so that's why that's the first reason why it doesn't bother me. The second reason why it really doesn't bother me is because people don't look at the facts. The Astros was one of the best road teams in 2017. They won 4 games in Dodger Stadium in 2017. And so they won Game 7 in Dodger Stadium in 2017. And so, I'm sorry, they won the series. I don't know. They won the series in 2017 at Dodger Stadium. And so I tell them, I was like, cheating doesn't travel, because if they did it here at the Astrodome, how could they do? The Dodgers not about to allow that. They can't get away with that. And they had the best road record in Major League Baseball. So I'm like, I'm more upset with the Astros on, you didn't have to do it.
Yeah.
Because you were good in 2017, you're good in 2018, you're good in 2019, you're good in 2020. Like, ever since then, you've still been consistently good. Why did you do it? That's why I'm mad that they got Alex Cora, though, that they rehired him.
Yeah, he got the gold. The Boston Red Sox have been given our gold medal for moral flexibility. That's something. Brian, where can people find you, man? Just give it. I'm going to put hot link everything, but tell everybody where they can find you.
You can find me at Big Sarge Sports with a Z at the end at Twitter, and Big Sarge Sports with the Z at the end.com. I'm also at Houston Style Magazine. Just go to the sports section. Twitter and Instagram is Big Sarge Sports. But before I leave here, I wanna say this. And this is the Veterans Day episode, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so I want to say to all the veterans out there, everybody who raised their right hand and took the oath of enlistment, those who sacrificed their family time, who sacrificed themselves to fight for their country. I just want to say thank you for your service. To all my Vietnam veterans, I want to say welcome home. And I would also, before I leave, would like to say this, I lost my wife to colon cancer in 2017. And she was a veteran as well. She served in the Air Force. And I lost my wife, 2017, and then I lost my mother 15 months later. December 2018. So 15 months apart, I lost both of my best friends, my mom and my wife. And one of the reasons why I got medically retired from the military was because of mental health issues. And so what I want to say to those veterans out there who are watching, who will be watching this, and what I want to say to the family and friends of veterans, please take mental health seriously. Please don't think that when someone is talking about, these veterans get to talking about their problems and their issues and the things that they went through and the things they're going through now, that it's like whining or complaining, or, how like people like to tell, hey, just suck it up and drive on, No, it's not the time to suck it up and drive on, because we are losing veterans daily to suicide. And so to all my veterans out there, I just want to say, hey, look, reach out to me. If you need somebody to talk to, reach out to me. My ears are always available. My shoulders are big enough for you to cry on. And, you reach out to me because I may need to reach out to you one day. That's why I preface, this statement by saying what I have been through. And so I just want to tell all my veterans, once again, thank you for your service. And you do have somebody that will listen to you.
Thank you for that, because I've actually talked on the show about my own struggles with PTSD before as well, the night terrors, the things like that. And you're exactly right. I think that we have to move past the macho part of it's okay for us to have had pain. You're about the most impressive guy I've ever had on the show, Brian. Thank you so much for being on Let's Get To.
Hey, man, thank you. I appreciate that.
Holler and a Swaller, a chug of ballpark brew, presented by the Hitter Sports.
So before we wrap up the episode and go into our closing, we are going to have a Holler and a Swaller presented by the good folks at the Hitter Sports. Make sure you follow the Hitter Sports. He's fun, especially during non-baseball. I'm a little surprised how much fun he's been on Twitter. But we are going to do a shout out and toast the Karbach You'll Shoot Your Eye Out. You'll shoot your eye out. Christmas story. You get it. But it's Veterans Day, and we are continuing to work our way towards Christmas beers as we build toward our holiday episode. But I want to do a toast to a couple of people. One, I want to do a toast to every single one of my brothers and sisters who have ever put their hand up for this country and said, listen, I believe in what this country is. I believe in what this country can be, so much so that I'm willing to sacrifice my life for it. And that's the first person who picked up a musket, at Concord and Lexington, to the guys in Afghanistan still on a patrol, even though back here it seems like political turmoil is going on. I also want to toast all the spouses, all the husbands and wives who really put their own lives on hold, put their own lives in suspended animation while their spouse serves. They serve to the kids as well. I think of my wife, Jessica. I think of Tammy Adair, who always did their best when we got back from deployments or whatever to make us feel at home and feel relaxed. And you can't know how hard it is when, if you're gone for months at a time and your wife has been like running the household, and then you've got to come in and now you don't know what your place is anymore. And it can be friction. It can cause tension. There's a high divorce rate in this community. So to all the spouses out there who have done that, I toast you. I toast Eric Adair, who I served with my last 2 years in Germany, and honestly, the best friend of any of the guys I ever served with. And I've talked about him on the show a bunch. He's been on the show a bunch. But I want to do a special shout out to Matt Dudley. Matt Dudley and I did not serve together. He was in the Air Force. I was in the military. See what I did, Matt? The first few years after I got out of the military were very difficult for me. Jessica and I will tell you that it was the most difficult years in our marriage. And it was difficult for a lot of reasons. It was just change and adjustment. And what am I going to do with my life? Because I was out because of an injury. I didn't have a lot of warning. I found out on October 31st that I'd be home December 5th. So I had about 5 or 6 weeks. I go from being a staff sergeant, having guys in control that I was in control of, a pretty high rank in the 1st Armored Division, having a sense of purpose, to not knowing what my life is going to be, to feeling useless, to feeling wasteful, to feeling like no one understood what I was talking about, and Jessica not really being able to help because I couldn't articulate what was wrong. And, then to see that part of the reason why they put me out was so they could put another guy in my spot and then have our guys be some of the first ones to go to Iraq was now a long year, because now are my guys going to make it home that I trained? And they all did. Thank God they all did. Well, I was a very old freshman, and I remember sitting in a political economics class and listening to this ROTC guy who was about to be a lieutenant talk about what he would do. And of course, he knew nothing. And I'm, again, still very much in this, like I was in the military thing and I don't know how to react. And I remember saying, well, sir, that's going to be a great way to get a bunch of young kids killed. And I forgot what asinine thing he thought he was patting. And I could tell that in the civilian world, people weren't used to being spoken to that way. A lesson I still haven't always learned. But I remember I was in this big auditorium, big teaching auditorium, and I walk up the stairs, and there's this guy at the top of the stairs, and he's like, how long were you in? And it was Matt Dudley, again, Air Force vet, who was speaking my language, who knew where I was, who knew the pain, who knew all of that stuff that goes with trying to readjust into civilian life. And I credit him so much with me getting through those first few years. Obviously, we've moved apart, so our friendship isn't as strong, but he's still somebody that I respect more than anybody. So I raised this to everybody that I toasted, most specifically to Matt Dudley. So here we go. Man, it's so good. It really reminds me of Christmas. Now, I usually end with holler and a swaller, baby, but I'm not going to do that. Today, I'm going to give you a very special joke that I don't think any civilian should tell a former Marine, but I'm going to do it because I'm not a civilian. I'm a vet. How does a Marine say helicopter?
And now, on to close it out, the right-hander from Houston, Texas, James Christopher.
So that is our show, and I'm holding up the bobblehead from the Lancaster Jethawks in the Top Gun Air Force style. Not Top Gun. Top Gun was Navy, people, I know. But in a flight suit, and then this was the box that came in with the Top Gun logo style. But, you know, we have really kept an eye on the Jethawks, and partly because Jess Knaster, who is such a big part of our show, was employed by them. You know, and I just hope, beyond hope, on this Veterans Day, that we realize how important a team like the Jethawks is. Them being a hub for the military. The San Antonio missions is the same thing. Like, any given day, a third of the crowd at the missions games are Air Force cadets or Army personnel. I know that there's a lot of reasons why teams are going to get shut down or moved or baseball could go away. And I'm not even disagreeing with a lot of those reasons. But I think we have to understand what a military base is. A military base is a population that is a hodgepodge of all 50 states, a lot of the territories, and even some people who have moved here want to become citizens and are taking the path of having enlisted to get there. I think the least thing we can do is give them a sense of normalcy, and what better way to get normalcy than a little bit of baseball. So we're going to keep putting our energy through it as much as we can to help save teams like the Jethawks. But that is our show. We're going to be back with a much more thankful episode next time. So until then, let's get to